and there's a lot of information out there that isn't necessarily very clear. So what we'd like to do today is kind of walk you through what a diabetic meal plan looks like. But before we're able to do that, we need to be able to define for you what diabetes is. So let's take a look at what is diabetes. It's not progressing through the slides. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So you've been told you have diabetes. What does that mean? For a lot of people, it means a lot of different things. I would like to be able to give you a very simple definition of a very complicated disease. Diabetes is a condition of too much sugar in the blood. It is the inability of our body to take sugar out of the bloodstream and put it where it needs to go. And where does it need to go? That sugar needs to be absorbed within the human blood cell and converted to energy. But the only way to get that sugar in the cell is by pairing it with insulin. And so diabetes basically is an imbalance between the amount of sugar we take in, the amount of sugar the body releases, and the amount of insulin we're able to produce to match that sugar. So this is what happens when you eat. We consume food and drink, and that's broken down into 5 major macronutrients. Those macronutrients are carbohydrates, fats, proteins, vitamins, and minerals. And the human body needs all of those to maintain good health. When we consume and digest carbohydrates, 100% of those carbs are converted to sugar in the bloodstream. A lot of people think that the issues with diabetes is just the consumption of cookies, cakes, candies, and pies. But just about everything we eat has some amount of carbs in it. Are you aware that 1 cup of green beans has 7 grams of carbohydrate? Which means, yes, green beans naturally have some sugar. So what happens is we digest the food. It's broken down into a form of sugar known as glucose. That glucose enters into the bloodstream. At that point, the body triggers the pancreas to release insulin. Insulin is a hormone. For those of you that didn't know that, yes, insulin is a hormone produced in the pancreas. For a person with diabetes, the pancreas makes little to no insulin, which means that you don't have the ability to match what you take in and is broken down as sugar, and then match that with insulin to be converted to energy. So what happens is that the sugar or the glucose then begins to build up in the bloodstream. The more sugar in the bloodstream, the more destruction of the human red blood cell. And as you know, we start out as a single cell. That cell accumulates to become tissue. Tissues then become organs. Organs become organ systems, which make up the human body. So the destruction that is caused by high blood sugars starts at a cellular level and ends up in multi-system organ failure. So what does this mean? The more carbs we take in, the more sugar that's released in the bloodstream. The more sugar in the bloodstream, the greater need for insulin. The less insulin we produce, the higher the blood sugars, therefore the higher hemoglobin A1C. The higher the hemoglobin A1C, or sugars in the bloodstream, the more organ damage that occurs. And it becomes a vicious cycle. So what should the A1C be? For an individual that has diabetes, the goal is the A1C should be less than 7. If you are pre-diabetic, the goal is an A1C of less than 5.6. This is information that a lot of people don't know or don't understand. And so to break it down for you, a hemoglobin A1C of 7 is an average blood sugar of about 154. An A1C of 5.6 is a blood sugar about 112 to 115. Any higher than that is considered high blood sugar or diabetes. So when we talk about our goals for our blood sugar, the American Diabetes Association has set targets for what our blood sugar should be like at certain points in the day. First of all, when we first get up in the morning, before we've had anything to eat or drink, the blood sugar average should be between about 80 and 130. 2 hours after each meal, meaning when you have digested the food and the body has started to convert these macronutrients into energy in the body, the blood sugars should recover to about 140 to 180. And then at bedtime, we'd like to keep the blood sugars in a range of about 100 to 140. And so the big question is, at these various times of the day, are our blood sugars too high, too low, and do we need to do some work to get them in range at these certain periods of the day? So in order to be able to do that, we have to talk about what we eat, our diet. Now, most people don't like the word diet. Personally, I used to say, just drop the T, and that explains how I feel about it. I just want to die. If I have to eat one more thing that tastes more like the plate than it does the food on it, just let me die. But we have to have a different attitude about diet. For us as diabetics, and yes, I am a diabetic also, we have to use the word diet as an acronym. Diet should stand for doing, intelligent, eating today. What that means is we have to, as diabetics, think about what we're putting in our body, when we're putting it in our body, and how much of it we're putting in our body. So we have to think about our meals. We cannot emergency eat. And what I mean by emergency eating is, let's say you spend your lunch hour today listening to me talk about diet, but you skip having a meal. So by 4 o'clock this afternoon, you're not hungry, you're hangry. And the first thing you're going to do when you get off work is jump in your car, go past the first drive-through you see, maybe it's Whataburger. And you, without thinking, you're going, I want a Whataburger with cheese, an order of French fries, a large Coke, and throw one of those apple pies in the bag while we're at it. And then what have we done to our diabetes? We have created a catastrophe. So as a diabetic, we have to do intelligent eating today, one meal at a time, one day at a time. So when we talk about diet, the important thing to remember is the food that you eat can either be the safest and most powerful form of medicine, or the food we eat can be our slowest form of poison. And for people with diabetes, there's very little gray in the middle. It's one or the other. Either it's your medicine or it's your poison. So, how should we eat to maintain a healthy blood sugar level? First off, individuals with diabetes need to have timely meals. You can't skip meals and go all day long with nothing to eat. That causes fluctuations in the blood sugar that can be dangerous, because when we eat, then we can overeat, causing extreme high blood sugars. We can skip meals and have extremely low blood sugars. We need to be consistent. We need to eat about the same amount each meal, 3 times a day, about every 4 to 5 hours, or 5 small meals about every 4 to 5 hours a day. These meals need to be balanced, and we'll talk about what a balanced meal looks like. And we need to follow the diet mantra. People don't understand that no matter what the chronic disease, for the most part, the diet mantra remains the same. What we should be consuming should be low in carbohydrates, low in fats, high in fiber, high in protein, and low in sodium. I have individuals that attend my diabetes education class learn to repeat the mantra: low carb, low fat, high fiber, high protein, low sodium. And if you can evaluate what you're putting into your body based on that diet mantra, then you tend to be healthier. You tend to have less high and low blood sugars. You feel better. You have more energy, and you have less opportunity for illness. So, the first thing that's important to know about these macronutrients is what converts to glucose or sugar. 100% of the carbohydrates that we digest convert to sugar in the bloodstream. 50% of the protein that we digest actually converts to sugar, but proteins are digested much slower than carbohydrates, so those carbs that we receive in our protein are usually low and are digested very slowly. And about 5 to 10% of the fat that we consume also converts to sugars. So as you can see, it's not just the cakes, cookies, pies, and candy that can cause elevations in the bloodstream. So what are the dietary recommendations? Well, first off, regular meals with the appropriate calories, a variety of foods that include fiber and starches, and steady intake of carbohydrates. Unfortunately, for most of us, on a daily basis, without ever thinking about it, we carb load. What that means is our consumption of carbs exceeds our ability to produce insulin to match what we've taken in. So, looking at those dietary recommendations, low fat and low cholesterol, we want to limit our red meats such as beef and liver. We also want to limit our lamb. Lamb is a very fatty meat. We want to avoid shellfish such as shrimp, clams, lobster, crawfish, oysters, and mussels. These foods are high in cholesterol. We want to eliminate fried foods and frequent restaurant foods from our diet because they all contain excessive amounts of fats, salts, and sugars. We want to increase our white meat, such as chicken and fish. We want to include and increase our fiber by having fresh fruits and vegetables and whole grains. Most fruits that we consume the skin on, such as apples, pears, peaches, plums, are good for individuals with a diabetes because of the fiber contained in the skin in those fruits. And yes, we should eat the skin. That also leads you to believe then, if we don't eat the skin, that those fruits and vegetables are not necessarily the best choices for us. Do we eat the skin on a banana? No. Do we eat the rind of the watermelon? Typically not. And so these are fruits and vegetables, or fruits, I should say, that we need to eat less of. We want more whole grains and nuts and wheat, whole wheat, brown rice. Foods of those nature contain high fiber. Fiber blocks the digestion of some carbs. That's why it's okay to have a medium baked sweet potato, but not okay to have a medium baked white or yellow potato. We want to limit our alcohol consumption. Alcohol causes rebound in the blood sugar. What that means is when it's initially consumed, it causes a significant immediate drop in the blood sugar. And then as this alcohol is converted to glucose, it then causes the blood sugars to skyrocket. We want to eliminate our trans fats. Our trans fats are generally hydrogenated fats or partially hydrogenated fats. And those are fats that visibly turn solid at room temperature. Crisco, coconut oil, stick butter, bacon grease, drippings from meat fat. All of those are solid at room temperature. So if they're solid at room temperature, what are they in our bodies? And last but not least, dietary recommendations strongly insist upon you stop smoking. Smoking can contribute so many problems for the average individual, especially individuals with chronic diseases, to include diabetes. So when we look at what we should eat, we have to know what we're consuming. And in order to know what we're consuming, we've got to know how to read a food label. A lot of people don't like having to do that. But with diabetes, it is vitally important that you know all of the ingredients that you're consuming, and does it follow our dietary mantra? So let me give you label reading 101. When looking at the label on a food, we're looking at the nutrition facts. What's in what I'm about to take into my body? We always start our investigation with what is defined as a serving size and how many servings are in the container. The reason that's important is the nutritional facts refer to a single serving. So if a particular item has 3 servings with 8 grams of carbs, and you ate the whole container, you didn't get 8 grams of carbs, you got 24. And that becomes important when we start looking at what are our limits in regards to these macronutrients. So let's take a look. Using our dietary mantra, we now know that for this particular item, a serving is a cup. 1 cup is a serving. So when we say the mantra goes low carb, the first thing we want to look at is our carbohydrates. And if you'll notice on the right-hand side, I give you the limits for those carbohydrates. For the adult female, you should consume no more than 30 to 45 grams of carbs per meal. That's the entire meal. For men, no more than 45 to 60 grams of carbs per meal. And snacks, or those 5 meals a day, should be no more than 15 to 20 grams of carbs per meal. Now, if you're trying to lose weight, then you want to keep your carbohydrate limits at the lower level, meaning less than 30 if you're female, less than 45 if you're male, and less than 15 if you're having 5 small meals a day. So the next item on our food mantra or our diet mantra would be low fat. It is recommended that our fat consumption, our total fat, is 5 grams per serving, or 5% or less of the total calories. If you look at the purple line down the right side of the nutrition fact, it says percent of daily values. That's your percentage of total calories. So for this particular item, the total fat is 12 grams, but our limit is 5 per serving. So this food would be outside of our dietary recommendations based on the fat. That's not even looking at what's saturated fat, which is bad, and what's trans fat, which is worse. So this particular food is something we would really strongly eliminate from our diet if possible, based on the number of carbs in the food, which we said was 31 grams of carbs. That's your whole meal. basically. So we want it to be low carb, low fat, high fiber. As I told you, fiber blocks the digestion of some carbs. And we want fiber. We want 5 grams or more per serving. And the average daily intake of fiber should be about 25 to 30 grams a day. If we look at the fiber in this food, which is located just below the carbohydrates, there is no dietary fiber. That means that the whole 31 grams of carbs that you eat will be digested and converted to sugar in the bloodstream. Now, I'm going to stop there for just a second because a lot of people are confused about total carbs versus sugars. And on this label, you can see there are 5 grams of sugar. But as a diabetic, you can actually ignore the grams of sugar because what we focus on is the total carbs and the fiber. The sugars are included in those total carbs. The sugar that is indicated on the food label is saying that is what we start out with as pure sugar. But what we digest in carbs turns to sugar. So we're not concerned with just the 5 grams. We're concerned with the whole 31 grams of sugar because we have no fiber to block it. So we want, again, low carb, low fat, high fiber, high protein. It is recommended that we have 15 to 30 grams of protein per meal. And that's for men and women. Men usually on the higher side. For women, our protein levels should be somewhere between 15 and 30. To determine your actual serving of protein, it is generally going to be the diameter of the palm of your hand and the thickness of your hand. So if you take a look at your hand, minus the thumb and the fingers, that's your serving of protein. Any questions about that so far?
We did have one question.
What was that?
Oh, I think she said you just answered her question on the fiber.
Okay, great. All right. And so we want high protein. Again, I keep going back to that food mantra: low carb, low fat, high fiber, high protein, and low sodium. The reason we focus on sodium is, one, the body does need sodium, but in small amounts. Large amounts of sodium cause an increase in the fluid retention in the body, which can lead to a number of things that we'll discuss in just a few minutes. But one of those is high blood pressure. So we want to make sure that we have foods that are low in sodium. And our sodium limits are 1,500 milligrams per day or no more than 500 milligrams per meal. Have you ever known a person that before they ever taste their food, the first thing they reach for is the salt shaker? Our table salt is a combination of sodium and chloride. And sodium chloride is what causes the effects that we see in high blood pressure, heart attacks, strokes, obesity. And so it is important that as a person with diabetes, we are very aware of how much sodium we're taking in, along with these other macronutrients. Again, I'm going to repeat it only because it is vitally important. And this is what you use to determine whether a food is your medicine or if it is your poison. Low carb, low fat, high fiber, high protein, and low sodium. Now that we have looked at this particular food, oh, I forgot to go through and show you. This item has 7 470 milligrams of sodium. That's before we ever consume it. Now I'm going to tell you what you're looking at. This is the food label for Kraft macaroni and cheese. I know if you could see Heather right now, she's cringing because she says that's one of her favorites. Kraft macaroni and cheese for a person with diabetes would be on the poison list rather than the medicine list. 470 milligrams of sodium before we ever consume this. And most people, if you're preparing it from the box, as you're boiling the water, what are the two things that people usually add? Salt, and some even add butter. So we've added more fat and more sodium. So this would exceed our limit by being over 500 milligrams per serving or per meal. So how do I learn to count my carbs? We just kind of went through what the carb limits are for men and for women. I usually tell the patients that attend the diabetes education class, we give this as a handout. I said, stick this on your refrigerator to help you to remember what it is you're consuming. Or take this with you, or that food label example, when you go grocery shopping. Now, when you go grocery shopping, it's going to take you a little longer at first because you're going to be reading the labels on everything you put in your basket. And you're going to realize some of the same foods that you have always had that you thought were healthy aren't your medicine, but are your poison. But as you do this, you develop a mental library of what you can eat and what you can't eat, or how much of it you can eat. Like the Kraft macaroni and cheese. If it didn't have all those other bad ingredients, but it was just over our carb limit, maybe we would only have half a serving rather than a full serving. So you see what the limits are in regards to your carb intake. Another important fact is, as a diabetic, we should eat our first meal of the day within 1 to 1.5 hours after waking up. That helps to reduce the amount of sugar that is being released by the liver because you've gone without food. A diabetic should eat 3 meals a day, every 4 to 5 hours, or 5 small meals about every 3 or 4 hours apart. So what are the foods that we absolutely need to avoid? Well, for those of you who love chicken fried steak, mashed potatoes, and gravy with that sweet tea, all of those are on this list. First off, we should avoid foods that are made with enriched flour. That is white flour. That would include breads, pastas, gravies, the coatings on meats. All of those are made with enriched flour. And many of our pre-processed foods contain enriched flour, to include things like Lipton broccoli and cheese. Those contain enriched flour. We want to avoid hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oils. Those are the oils I was talking about that are solid at room temperature. And of course, we want to avoid extra sugars and high fructose corn syrup. So remember, if it's white, we don't bite. If it's wheat, we can eat. Basically, that is referring to foods that are rich in fiber. Brown rice, whole wheat pasta, whole wheat breads, sweet potatoes, the juice rather than the gravy from meats. These are all going to be healthier for you than what I show you on the left-hand side. That's the stockpile. And people say, well, potatoes aren't bad. There's as many carbs in a medium baked potato as there is in a slice of chocolate cake. Think about that for a moment. Remember, if it's white, we don't bite. If it's wheat, we can eat. So when we start talking about carbohydrate consumption, and I said that just about everything we eat has some amount of carbs in it. That's correct. But for us, what we want are our complex carbs, and what we want to avoid are our simple carbs. Simple carbs or simple sugars are broken down very easily and very quickly in the bloodstream, and they send spurts of sugar into the bloodstream immediately after consumption. Have you ever been told to drink a glass of orange juice as a rescue for low blood sugar? That's one of the things we tell patients. But that should also tell you, if I'm drinking orange juice to elevate my blood sugar because it's dangerously low, what's that orange juice doing to my blood sugar if it's not low? A complex carb is one that is harder to break down. It requires mechanical energy, such as chewing, swallowing, digesting, and it increases in the metabolism. It is released slower in the bloodstream than a simple carb. If you think about it this way, what do you have to do to digest a glass of orange juice? You pick up the glass, you put it to your lips, you pour it in your mouth and swallow. It immediately is absorbed into the bloodstream and causes elevation in the blood sugar. But if I handed you an orange, you got to peel it, section it, putting a piece in your mouth one at a time. Most people don't shove a whole orange in their mouth. Then you've got to chew it, swallow it, and then it's broken down in smaller amounts. When I said that green beans have 7 grams of carbs, those are complex carbs because green beans contain vitamins, minerals, fiber, which helps to slow the digestion of those complex carbs. And yes, complex carbs are the good ones. Now, here is where we do a little bit of a brain teaser. It'll help you to understand the amount of sugar that you're actually taking in. 1 pack, 1 sugar cube, and 1 teaspoon of sugar are all the equivalency of 4 grams of carbs, which means for every 4 grams of carbs that you digest, you've just ingested a teaspoon of sugar. This is where a lot of people get the aha moment. Are you surprised? This is a Marie Callender's chicken pot pie. It contains 61 grams of carbs, which means if you eat a Marie Callender chicken pot pie, you just consumed 15¼ teaspoons of sugar. 1 cup, which is 2 servings, 1 bowl, which is 2 cups, which is 2 servings of Honey Bunches of Oats, 47 grams of carbs, or 12 teaspoons of sugar, and that doesn't include the milk. 1 medium order of French fries, whether it's Burger King, whether it's Wendy's, whether it's McDonald's, a medium order of fries is generally about 68 grams of carbs or higher, which is 17 teaspoons of sugar. 1 Big Mac, 45 grams of sugar or carbs, 11.25 or 11¼ teaspoons of sugar. 1 slice of Sara Lee chocolate cake has 51 grams of carbs, 12¾ teaspoons of sugar. 1 slice of thin crust Pizza Hut pepperoni pizza has 34 grams of carbs, 8.5 teaspoons of sugar. And here's where everybody gets blown away. A serving of ice cream is 2/3 of a cup. That's a little more than half a cup, but less than a whole cup. What that means is the average scoop is 2 servings. And if you ate a bowl with 6 scoops of ice cream, you consumed 144 grams of carbs, or you just ate 36 teaspoons of sugar. Is anyone adding this up in their head? If you consumed everything on this screen in one day, which there are a lot of people who can and do, you have consumed over 200 teaspoons of sugar, or the equivalency of half of a 1-pound bag of sugar. And as a diabetic, you don't have the capability of producing enough insulin to compensate for the sugar in your bloodstream. And sugar has many names. People say, well, I don't eat sugar. I only use honey. And my response to them is, honey is sugar, honey. Sugar can be high fructose corn syrup or sucrose, which is refined table sugar. Excuse me, that was sucrose. Fructose is the sugar that we naturally find in fruits and in honey. Lactose is a milk sugar. Maltose, the sugars found in some grains, some cereals, and beer. Corn syrup, which is sugar extracted from corn. Honey, molasses, brown sugar, maple syrup, cane juice, cane syrup, confectionery powdered sugar, nectars, evaporated corn sweetener, and raw cane sugar are all sugars that are metabolized in the human body very quickly. And if you look at this food label for just a second and you start counting the amounts of different kinds of sugar in this particular food, you would be very surprised at the amount of sugar that you would consume. And yes, this is a Kellogg brand sugar cereal that we feed our children on a regular basis. So we have to be cautious when it comes to sugar. A single 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola has 10 teaspoons of sugar. A 20-ounce bottle, 17 teaspoons of sugar. And a 32-ounce bottle of Coke has 27 teaspoons of sugar. And just because we assume something to be healthy doesn't mean it is. Red Bull, which is not healthy, first of all, 7 teaspoons of sugar, 23 grams of carbs. Orange juice, 41 grams of carbs, 10 teaspoons of sugar. Gatorade, a regular Gatorade has 42 grams of carbs. That's 10 teaspoons of sugar. Vitamin water. People think because it has the word vitamin that it's healthy, but it's not. As you can see, this goes on. And so we have to be very cautious about what we're consuming as far as the sugars are concerned. Now, we also have to be concerned with the term sugar-free. There are a range of foods and drinks that carry these labels, but they're not truly sugar-free if they contain carbs. Because what do carbs convert to? Sugar. The claims are sugar-free, reduced sugar, light, no sugar added. Always check the nutritional facts for the total carb content, because that's going to be the true tell as to what you're consuming. Because it says sugar-free doesn't mean that it's healthy. One thing that people don't know is the FDA permits a food label to claim no sugar added if it contains no sugar added during the processing or packing of the food. It can contain sugars such as juices and dried fruits, and that is not part of the sugar added. This is something that a lot of people don't understand. And if something is labeled light, light means it's 10% less carbs than their original brand. For example, Minute Maid lemonade and Minute Maid light lemonade. Light lemonade still has carbs, just 10% less than their regular lemonade. Now, if it says 0 carbs, that is sugar-free. So the question is, are sugar substitutes okay? Again, yes, artificial sweeteners are synthetic sugar substitutes derived from nature, but they are chemically modified and they are regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. They add no calories to your diet and could potentially reduce your overall caloric and carbohydrate intake. But artificial sweeteners, like anything, should be consumed in moderation. And when we look at best and worst, there is a hierarchy. The 3 on the left are less healthy for you than the 3 on the right. Why? 1, Sweet and Low, which Equal and Splenda are all chemically altered. Truvia, monk fruit, stevia are all plant-based sweeteners. And plant-based sweeteners are healthier for us because they contain less altering chemicals. So when we eat carbs, it's important to make sure that we're eating carbs with fiber. We want to make sure that we're getting those 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day, or a minimum of 7 to 10 grams per meal. And we can find fiber in many, many foods. Some of the best fruits for a person with diabetes are berries. Strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, blueberries, acai berries. Because when we consume them, we consume the seeds. And those seeds help to block some of the digestion of the carbs. So let's not forget our protein. Protein can take up to 4 to 5 hours to completely digest. And that protein, when it binds with those carbs, slows down that release of sugar in the bloodstream. Protein is used to build and maintain body systems. It helps to repair. It helps in our growth and development. It helps with our bones, organs, muscles, arteries, our veins, our hair, our skin. They're all made of protein. So a protein intake is very important. We should have 1 to 2 servings of lean protein. And we want to select meats that have the description loin tied to their name. For example, beef tenderloin, sirloin steak, pork tenderloin. The loin is the leanest of the meats, and we want to have those meats skinless. We want to trim the extra fat off of our meats, and we want to limit our shellfish because they are high in cholesterol. We should have fish 2 to 3 times a week, or fish oil capsules with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. For people who don't like that burping taste, it's recommended you put them in the freezer. And that way you don't taste it and it's broken down in the digestive system rather than that nasty fishy taste that you get on the palate. Our foods should be baked, grilled, broiled, or slow cooked. Our proteins are broken down when they're fried. Protein breaks down at high heat. So slow cooking and those other methods are going to be healthier for you. Plus, you don't add fat. Remember this, when it comes to your protein, the less the feet, the better the meat. And I've had people that ponder that statement. But if you think about it, how many feet does a pig, a cow, or a sheep have? 4. How many feet does a chicken or a turkey have? 2. What about an egg? None. What about a fish? None. What about mushrooms, tofu, adenomates? These are all plant-based proteins. And these proteins are going to be healthier for you and should be consumed more frequently than large amounts of beef, pork, and lamb. So again, the less the feet, the better the meat. We talked about the carbohydrates, the fats, the proteins. When we look at fats and cholesterol, it's important that we maintain low cholesterol consumption. We want to keep our cholesterol low. So the limit on our cholesterol should be no more than 200 to 300 milligrams per day. We want to keep our fat, as we said earlier, at 5 grams. And we want to avoid saturated fats and trans fats and hydrogenated oils. These oils are semi-solid in the human body, which also slows down the movement of other things in the bloodstream, to include vitamins and minerals. It also allows sugar to build up and stack in the bloodstreams, which then can again contribute to heart attacks, strokes. And what people don't understand is that high blood sugars have now directly been associated with the early onset of dementia and Alzheimer's. That is a discussion for another day. So what we want to do is we want to reduce our fat by using low-fat cooking, trimming the visible fat off of meats, removing the skin off of meat, sauteing foods in water instead of oil, using vegetable oil and sprays instead of lard or butter, using nonstick cookware and sprays so that we're not adding additional fat. Roasting, steaming, broiling, baking don't require additional fats. When we come to choose fats, we want to choose healthy fats. Monounsaturated fats are going to be healthier than saturated fat. Our monounsaturated fats include olive oil, canola oil, avocados, and nuts. Polyunsaturated fats, the difference between a monounsaturated fat is a one source or single source of fats. Polyunsaturated are multi-sources of fats. Our good polyunsaturated omega-3 fats are our fatty fish, such as salmon, flax and flaxseed oil, canola, soybean oil, and walnuts. Omega-6 vegetable oils are going to be like canola oil, safflower, cottonseed, sesame, and sunflower oils. Those are healthy for you. You want soft, spreadable margarines or butters. And the reason that they are soft is we are adding polyunsaturated fats to those saturated fats to decrease the fat consumption. And as you can see on the other side here on the right, we have the unhealthy fats. The saturated fats are solid at room temperature. Trans fats contain such things that cause an increase in the LDL, which is your bad cholesterol, and a decrease in your good cholesterol. These are the candies, the shortenings, the stick butter, the packaged crackers, cookies, and baked goods. So when we're choosing our cholesterol, we want to avoid foods that are full dairy, like whole milk, butter, full fat yogurts, cheese, and things that are soft cheeses. The more fat in a cheese, the softer the cheese is. So that makes you think about things like Velveeta and American cheese. Those contain more fat than you would a sharp cheddar or a mozzarella or even a Parmesan. Red meats, we want to avoid large amounts of red meats like steak, roast, ribs, pork chops, fatty ground beef. They're high in saturated fats. We want to avoid processed meats like bologna and hot dogs, spam, things of that nature, fried foods, and yes, baked goods. Those foods that are high in cholesterol but are still healthy are going to be eggs. For a diabetic, for every 2 eggs, you should have 1 yolk. We need to limit shellfish. We talked about that. You can have shellfish. It's high in cholesterol, but it's low in fat. So we're limiting our shellfish consumption to about once every 2 weeks. And then we want lean meats. And I think we've talked about what those lean meats are. And then there are others that are low in cholesterol that you don't hear about frequently, and that's liver pate, kidney, and sweetbreads. When they mention sweetbreads in the FDA dietary regulations, I didn't know exactly what sweetbreads were. And then when I found out what it was, I didn't want to eat it anyway. Sweetbreads are referring to the actual pancreas of an animal. Mine's not working, so I'm not planning on eating anybody else's. So there you have it. That also includes things like hearts, gizzards, and tripe. While you might find these meats appealing or maybe not find them appealing, they're better options than the spam or some of the red meats that we do choose. Again, looking at sodium, we want to make sure that we're keeping it under the 500 milligrams per meal. Don't grab the salt shaker. We want to do things like eating the DASH diet. And basically, DASH stands for direct alternatives to stop hypertension. We want to reduce the amount of sodium in our dietary consumption. We want to eat fresh vegetables. Fresh is always best. In the hierarchy of what we choose, fresh is the best, frozen is next, and last are canned. We want to go low or no when it comes to salt or sodium. We want to pay attention to how food is prepared. Unfortunately, we can't see the kitchen or the cooks in restaurants, so we have no idea how much sodium has been added to the foods that we order. Unless you're watching them at McDonald's, put that salt on those French fries. Oh my goodness. And we want to limit our processed foods. We want to use natural herbs and spices to spice things up. These are foods that we would want to consume as alternatives to the foods we want to avoid. Now, I could go through this list, but I think we've talked about a lot of these already. And this presentation will be available to you. So we have, Heather will be providing this to you later on. So when we talk about our meal plan, you have to understand that no particular meal plan is going to work for everybody. Different people have different needs based on a number of things: food preferences, allergies, dentation, what you can and can't chew, what you can tolerate in spice. No matter what your dietary goals are, you guys now have the information that you need to make the right meal choices. What's important is the quality of the food and the total number of carbs that you eat. So we control our carbs and our calories by controlling our portions. We want to cut the crap, and crap stands for carbonated drinks, refined sugars, artificial sweeteners and colors, processed foods, and we want to eat more food. Fruits and veggies, organic lean proteins, omega-3 fatty acids, and we want to drink water. We need to take a look at what is it we're snacking on. Maybe it's time to rethink that midnight snack. This is what a healthy plate should look like. You should have half of the plate with vegetables, leafy vegetables. 1/4 of your plate is protein, lean protein, skinless protein, and 1/4 of the plate is carbohydrates, and an additional tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of fat. That is a healthy plate. Our healthy plates should be eaten at every meal. We need to limit our alcohol consumption. As you can see here, I give you the limits. For women, we get 1 4-ounce glass of wine, 1 12-ounce can of beer, or 1.5 ounces of spirits. That's 1 shot, ladies and gentlemen. And for men, you get twice that. And no, you can't save up for the weekend, guys. I'm sorry to tell you. We want to make sure that we quit smoking. And I've provided you some resources here for the American Lung Association. And there are a number of different ways you can get assistance to help you stop smoking. Any questions? I'll address any questions very quickly because I'd like to do a very quick food demo for you on a snack that would be healthy for diabetics and non-diabetics. Any questions?
If you have any questions, please place them in the chat and then we'll answer those questions.
Do we have any questions in the chat? I don't. Any questions? Okay, then I'd like to take just a few moments to show you guys a healthy snack that is very quickly and very easily prepared. If you can give me one moment. Turn on the other light. Okay, Heather's trying to get the video up for you, and while she's doing that, I wanted to go ahead and tell you what I'm making. We talked about having a snack that is low in carbs, low in fat, high in fiber, high in protein, and low in sodium. So what I am it was charred, and I don't know if you guys can see that or not. But what I do is take all of these ingredients and we're going to put them into the blender. Now with the chickpeas, I tried not to use all of the juice initially because then it can make the hummus too runny. And now I'm throwing chickpeas all over the table. But I save that juice and add it back if my hummus is too thick. The key to making hummus creamy, though, is the use of the tahini or the sesame paste. And sesame paste can be purchased in HEB, and it's usually right next to the peanut butter. We're going to add our teaspoon. I'm just kind of tahini. And our lemon juice. Guys, normally you would measure these out, but I've made this so much I eyeball stuff. And that's it. Those are the ingredients. And once we've added all of those ingredients, we're just going to mix this until it's creamy. Where I start to add some of that juice back. And there you have it. Now I'm going to move a little closer to the camera so you can see this. But this hummus, as you can probably see from here, can be an excellent snack. It can be added with salads, and it is very high in fiber, protein, and it's delicious. Thank you guys, and we'll see you at the next Lunch and Learn.
We have a couple questions.
Questions, okay.
Are chia seeds good for us to put in our food, and shakes? And then somebody also asked.
Yes.
They were told that you need to soak chia seeds in water or liquid before consuming. Is that correct?
Yes, both are correct. Yes, chia seeds are good, and it is recommended that you soak them first. Now, there are chia seeds that have been pre-soaked. You would just need to, but they're going to be more expensive. Soaking them is not that big a deal, but it's like $1 more. But it's important that you do consume chia seeds. Chia seeds are very healthy for you. They add antioxidants, and they are a vital part of our healthy plate.
And how long are you supposed to soak them?
I believe the term, what is recommended is about an hour to 2 hours. Next question.
Are there any other questions?
All right. Well, guys, thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining.
You guys want to all try some hummus?